Hello everyone and welcome to my coloring corner. Today is Friday and instead of First Impressions Friday, because it is a holiday month, is my birth month, so I'm not allowed to buy anything. So instead of First Impressions Fridays for the month, I will be going through the different medias that we're going to be using. And after a week of using things, I get a better impression of problems or good things, bad things, things like that on different things, especially things like markers that I don't use very often. So I purchased these markers. Uh, I have the brush markers as well as the bullet chisel nib markers. Um, they are the Arteza um, Everblend markers. Sorry, just moving that so that I can show you the different markers. This is a stand that my husband printed, and it holds all my markers. I can try to give you a view of it. Let me see. Sorry about the camera move, but we're going to turn it so you can see. It is a large marker holder, holds all the markers, stands on my desk. That's the joy of it. So there's two different types of Everblend markers. There is the white ones and the gray ones. The gray ones are a brush tip with a medium chisel. The white ones are a fine tip with a broad chisel. They are compatible with each other, of course, and they're not a terrible marker. They work very nicely. They are refillable at some point. They haven't come out with the refills yet, but you can purchase open stock, so you can purchase one color. I can't say you can purchase one marker because when you purchase one color, you get four of that color. So I won't say you can purchase one marker because you can't. You can, however, purchase the nibs, whether it be the chisel nib, the brush nib, or the fine tip nib. You can purchase replacement nibs, which is great. I did purchase some of the replacement nibs. They cannot be interchanged with the, like I bought some of the brush nibs, hoping that I could use a brush nib instead of the chisel nib in the brush or the fine tip and the broad, but you can't replace it. So they are not interchangeable. You have to use a brush nib with a brush nib and that sort of thing. Now, I have colored with these for the week. I'll show you the pictures that I have colored. So I colored the cowboy. I told you I would. I did color this on Discord. I'm going to zip you up here just a tad. There we go, so you can actually see the whole picture. Yeah, I did color this on Discord. We do a lot of coloring on and chatting on Discord, so of course I will throw it out there that everyone is invited to join us if you want to sit and chat and color. So I did this one. This one here I also finished on Discord. And this one I have some things to show you. These are both done on the Nina cardstock. This one I did on the channel, and this one is done on the Express It cardstock. This was a buddy color that I completed on Discord with one of the people in Discord. And of course it is also done on Express It, and I added stickles because glitter. This one here also is one that I did on Discord. I do a lot of coloring on Discord, just so you know. This was completed on Discord, and of course I have some glitter gel pens in there. and it is also done on Express It marker paper, blending paper. Now, there's a difference between using the markers on the marker paper and using the markers on the cardstock. The markers are not as juicy as, say, the Ohuhu. I did use the Ohuhu markers as well this week on one picture. Just doing a comparison between for our not your typical Tuesday, I did a comparison of papers. And I used the Ohuhus because of the color selection. I wanted a really pastel color selection, and I have the pastel Ohuhus, so that is what I used. So one of the things that I have found with these markers is they don't seem to have as much ink in them the first time you go down. So when you're laying down the marker in for the first time, you can find that, and I should have printed off something. Hold on a sec. I'm going to print off something. Um, you should be able to lay down the marker and not find it to be lacking pigment. And some of them I have found takes a little bit of time and going over things a few times in order to get a really good amount of color down. Um, trying to find the a picture that I have that has multiple small things on it, and for some reason I'm not finding it. Sorry, guys. Do apologize. I should have done this beforehand, and I didn't think of it because, who thinks beforehand? All right, so back here. So I know Joanna has one, so we'll use that. We will use Johanna's uh, Flourish. This is also pages out of World of Wonders. Also has these pages in it. So if you have the World of Wonders, it's the same. It's part of one of the pages in World of Wonders. So that's what we're going to work on here. And hopefully it prints out nice and clear. I'm going to print this on the Express It marker paper, and I know these are small pictures, so sometimes with smaller pictures you're not going to get the full gist of what I'm talking about here, but hopefully it will show you what I mean. Okay, So I have this page here, and like I said, it is a smaller page, a page of smaller objects. So sometimes when you're coloring with something that doesn't like to give out color, the smaller pages don't work so well. So let's pick this one up here. So when you put down the color, you want the color to be quite dark to start with. It doesn't always happen, um, especially if you're doing large areas. Now, one of the things that I have found with these markers is you have to be really careful with them. I have had them go bloop and leave a great big huge blob of ink on my page. This did not happen as soon as I opened the marker, so it's not a compression thing. Sometimes if you open a marker that's been sitting for a long period of time, you get a bloop because of the amount of ink that's in the marker. But sometimes these markers will go bloop even if they have been used and that sort of thing. I had it happen with a marker that I had been using for the whole time on, let's see if I can find the picture, on this picture here when I was doing her hair. I had the purple go bloop when I didn't want it to. So I had to actually blend it in, which is something fairly easy to do. It's just sometimes you don't want it to go bloop and have to blend it in, especially when you're at the end of your coloring. So I do enjoy the brush marker more than the chisel nib, bullet nib one, only because I like the movement of the brush. The bullet nib has its place, and I'll show you what I mean by that here. I'll switch you over to the close-up camera so you can actually see what I'm doing. So as you can see, I quickly covered that with the not bullet nib, the brush nib. Now for these smaller things, the brush nib might be a little bit too big. Even though it has a very, very fine tip at the tip of the brush, if you're not really careful, you can end up covering too much. And as you can see, it is a very quick lay down of color, and the color goes down quite nicely. Now, the issues that I had, for example, on the horse here, let's switch it back over to the main. When I was covering the whole area of the horse, as you can probably see, it looks like there's areas that didn't get enough ink. And that's because when I was coloring that area, the ink would just stop flowing and then it would pick up again. It was I was worried that the pen was out of ink and I hadn't used the pen before. So I was a little bit concerned with the flow of ink is the best word to put it, best way to put it. Um, I found that sometimes the ink itself just doesn't flow out of the marker very well. But all, basically they do what they're supposed to do. They blend, they do cover fairly decently. I'm going to use this one here just to show you the skin tones. These are skin tones that I use for some of the skins, and some of them are not like this one here, When I use it, it just feels really dry. In the smaller areas, not so much. But once I get into a larger area, I find that they dry out really, really easily. And I have to put down a layer of ink in order to get a smooth layer afterwards. So as you can see here, I'm moving it along, but it's not putting out as much ink as some of the other pens. And it just looks really, really choppy. And that could be the way that I'm using them, or it could be the marker itself. I do find that some of the markers, while I'm coloring with them, um, you can look at the tip of the pen and actually see that it's white, which tells me that there's a flow issue. Now you can correct this issue by cleaning the nib. Sometimes the nib is just dirty, and with alcohol markers, especially if they've been sitting for a little while, you can find that the pigment itself has crystallized a little bit in the marker. So you may find that you need to clean your nibs and resume that flow. I was hoping that see, as you can see there, it's starting to go a little white on the end. The ivory does it quite a bit, but it's harder to see because, well, it's ivory. Just putting in a little bit of a light color in the areas that the fire is, because we want that to be a little bit lighter. But altogether, the major problem that I have found with them is the bloop and the dryness of the marker. Once you get a layer of marker down onto the page, they seem to flow quite easily. It's working with it without getting that layer on the page first. And sometimes I find I don't have enough of the right colors, but that's my own fault because I didn't buy all the set. So if you find that you're missing pertinent colors, you may have to look at other areas of the set. I really wish they would come out with the brush markers in a full set instead of just the little sets of 36 that they have, because yeah, I have full set syndrome and we all know what that means. Just putting in some shadows. And then we're going to put in a little bit of a darker shadow. They do flow very nicely once you get a layer down though. Make sure that you are careful with your movements, because like I said, sometimes if you're trying to do a large area or something, you can end up getting that bloop effect when you don't want it. And it's not going to do it because, I want it to. I was hoping it would do at least the problem I'm having with the coverage. But of course, there's a lot of smaller details in this picture. And it says, no, we're not going to do that for you. And you just blend things together. They do blend really nicely. And you can definitely get a good coverage without any streaks, which is great. And I think I just grabbed the wrong one. Yeah, I did. Okay. And you can also correct mistakes. I grabbed the wrong marker. I grabbed the ivory or the powder pink when I wanted the ivory. Okay. So as you can see, it covers a large area fairly quickly and quite thoroughly. The only thing that I have to remind you to look for is when you're covering a large area and it looks like it's missing areas. Just continue to finish that area that you're working on and move on to your next color. When you come back with your next color, it'll flow a little bit easier. And then when you go over it again with your blender, your blending color, it does fill in all those gaps that you may find that you missed the first time around. And now on regular paper, such as the cardstock and that sort of thing, I also have found that they do bleed quite a bit, so you may have to remember to watch where your bleed lines are. All right, now I need this one. Just so I can get that blend in there. And the Express It cardstock, I have found, does accept quite a bit of color. It accepts quite a bit of pigment and working. So when you're working with your markers to get your blend going and to build that blend up, the Express It does accept quite a bit of that marker, so without bleeding out of the lines, which is fantastic. So definitely one of those things that you have to think about when choosing um, whether or not you're going to use markers is how much blending or how much color tones that you have to add in there. Now, because this has a lot of different aspects like fire and stuff like that, there's a lot of different tones that need to be added. So using the Express It is the best choice because of the fact that I want to put down a lot of different colors. They do clip really, really tight, so make sure that when you're putting the lids back on your markers that you click them quite firmly. So with the Express It, you can get into really tiny details very, very easily, and you can blend quite a bit. So, for example, this little tree here, I'm going to do in this darker green. You also want to work from light to dark. And this is putting out a lot of ink. Some of them put out a huge amount of ink, so you have to be careful. Like this one is putting out a lot more ink than I expected it to. And then you can come back in with a darker green. And do your shadowing. And still maintain that line. I can go right up to the line and not be concerned about whether or not it's going to bleed over. Where with, say, the cardstock or coloring book paper, you definitely have to watch out for that bleed over. Let me see if I can find something that I was... There, let's see. I'll show you in the Jade Summer book. So in the Jade Summer book, we have some grayscale pages here. Let's find something that has a little bit of detail, but not a lot of detail. Seems that there's a lot of mermaids in here. I know there's some smaller ones. Let's see if we can find something fairly small. And you also have to watch for thirsty paper. The Jade Summer book is extremely thirsty paper. Yeah, we'll just... Is there a... This book belongs to page or anything? Let's see. Yeah, there's not even a... Okay. Maybe this isn't the best book to do this in. Alright, so we'll just do the first page here. There's a lot of open areas and a lot of different availabilities for color movement. Now make sure that you put something behind your page that will absorb your ink. I don't want to use that. So we're going to put a piece of cardstock behind the page. Now, because these have a black background, um, you're not going to see as much of the bleed on the opposing side of the page. However, it's still going to be there even if you don't see it. Now I'm going to start with the skin tones. So I'm going to start with powder pink. I do apologize. We'll call her. I'll call her back when I'm done. So we're going to start with the powder pink. So I'm going to start in a larger area so you can see what I mean by the movement of pigment. So I'm starting quite a ways away from the edge of the page, because if I don't, and I come right up onto there, especially in this area, it's going to overflow into areas that I don't want it to overflow into. And it's just going to run. And the more color that you add, the more it's going to run. One of the things you have to watch out for, especially with markers, is going over the lines. So if you say I went over the lines into her dress here, it would bleed everything into that dress. So as you can see, I'll switch you over to the close-up. As you can see, I'm coming down here and I'm getting close, and it's just moving that pigment right over on its own. Give it a little bit of a swish, take a look at it, watch where it's moving to, because you don't want it to move too far. And this paper is really thirsty. And it's just picking up all that ink. And now I'm starting to have that issue that I was talking to you about, where there's not as much ink going down as on the Express It. And you can see on my pen here that some of the end is turning white. And that's because the ink isn't. I do believe the reason for that is because the ink isn't getting all the way to the edge of the pen. Now, sometimes you can cure that by taking the lid off the other end and getting that flow going again, and sometimes you just have to clean your marker. Now, most of the time, if you get too close to an edge and you just let it bleed down, the black area will stop your bleed. However, sometimes if you go over the edge with your marker and open that area, it will just continue to bleed out of that area. So I'll show you here what I mean, because that's an area I can fix. So say I go up in there. When I go like this, and I get the marker going through there, you can watch it continue to bleed out of that spot. And then if I come in with some other colors for shadowing and whatnot. Another thing I do find is that when I'm using multiple markers, multiple colors, I try to keep the at least two of the colors open at all times while I'm working with them. Now we're going to try to blend that in. So we're just going to bring it this way. This one here, it's still bleeding out. So if I add more color here and I do the shadow, the more marker you add, the more it's going to bleed. So we're going to blend that shadow in. Bit of a shadow here. Try to keep your edges of your marker wet while you're using them. And you should get a good coverage without any huge lines. So you'll get a good blend. But as for my impressions of these markers, other than the fact that sometimes I find that the flow isn't the way it should be on a practically brand new marker that I have barely used, I do find that the brushes are really, really nice to work with. And when they decide they're going to be juicy, they're very juicy, and they will go bloop. So be very careful. Keep a spare piece of paper close by so that when you do have something, and you can see it coming down, when you do have something that is going to go bloop, you're able to see it and brush it over to a piece of paper to catch that bloop. After the first time, I started keeping an eye on it and was able to actually see that it was going to go bloop. So I was able to catch it before it did. Always make sure that you stay away from the black lines. Otherwise, if it starts to bleed in, it will continue to bleed in over that black line to areas that you don't want it to. Sometimes it's easily fixed. Sometimes, depending upon the color, not so much. And also remember with markers, these ones especially, the more times you go over it, the darker it's going to be. And I have found that very true with these markers. The more times I go over something, the darker it is. So I'm constantly going over the entire picture because I want it to be even. All right, so that's my final impressions of these markers. These are going to be switched out on Saturday. We will be using a different set of markers on Saturday, so stay tuned for that. And like I said, the brush marker is a very good brush marker. It does bleed through, so as you can see, there is bleed through there. That is why you have to make sure that you keep a piece of paper handy. Even on the cardstock, it does bleed through the blending stock. However, with the blending stock, you're not in a book, so if you have, like I have a mat here, you can usually keep that bleed on the mat and not in a book. So, with coloring with them for the entire week on both cardstock and on the blending stock, I would definitely suggest investing in a blending stock, whether it be the Express It or any other type of glossy, almost glossy stock, to better blend and move that marker around. So these three here, these three here are all done on the Express It blending stock, and I didn't have a lot of choppiness. I was able to blend them very, very, very carefully, or not carefully, successfully, and I was not ever concerned about bleeding over the lines. With the cardstock, I was a lot more careful because, as you can see with this one here, let's switch back over to the close-up. I did have a lot of issues of bleed over where the marker just bled into the other colors. So after I did this egg, I started being a lot more careful. However, I still had some bleed out on this one and this one and this one. So even though I was really careful with where I put the marker and how much marker I put down, I still had some issues with bleeding, which does happen. I also had some issues with the cardstock in blending, putting down the dark areas and blending it into the lighter areas. With some colors. With other colors, they blended just really nicely. So it's a little bit of a finicky thing sometimes because this area here blended very, very nicely, where this area here didn't blend very well at all. So I think it depends upon the marker, how much pigment, or not pigment, how much ink is coming out of the marker at the time, and how quickly you can move it, especially on these really thirsty papers. This one here, you can see that the marker started and stopped quite a bit, and I was constantly moving. However, once I put in the shadows from the cowboy here, as well as the shadows of the horse, and then went over it, I was able to cover most of that and blend it in to the horse's hair. So it's not a big deal. It's not something that I can't fix or couldn't fix. I just found that, when you're laying down the marker the first time and it looks really splotchy, it's a little bit annoying. But for a fairly budget-friendly set of markers, however, I won't say that they are completely budget-friendly, because once you purchase all of the different sets, you are going to find that you can purchase a 216 set of Ohuhus for approximately the same price. So do your research. If you want to try a comparison between, say, one of these and the Ohuhus. Um, purchase one. I don't know if you can get the Ohuhus open stock, um, or whether or not they're refillable, but they are a lot cheaper. You can get a 216 set for like $165, where for the full set of the brush markers, it's I think ranging about $300-400, if not more. So they're not inexpensive. They are way less expensive than Copics, and they do. I have a couple of Copic chows as well as sketches, and they do work very, very similarly. So, is it a Copic? No. Is it a brush alcohol marker that works very well? Yes. Does it have some issues? Yes, but every medium is going to. You just have to learn your workarounds on how to work with that issue. Like I said, the issue here where the marker seemed to not have enough ink, even though it was a brand new marker. Once I got that first layer down and put down the other colors on top of it, and then went over to blend everything together, it worked a lot nicer. So I think it's more of a factor of A, the paper is very thirsty, or B, the marker nib doesn't have enough flow of the marker, um, of the alcohol, and it just needs to be cleaned. You can either replace the nib, which is what I will probably do with the next one that I find like that, and see if that helps, or you can clean the nib, which you can do it with just a high potency rubbing alcohol. You just soak it in there and scrub it out. And you can also do that with your Copics and things like that as well. So all in all, they worked very well for coloring. They blended very nicely. They, like I was able to get multiple color blends in the flowers as well as on this one here, where I was able to get 3 or 4 different colors into a blend. Same with this one. I was able to get, 4 different colors into her hair and blend those very nicely together where there is no start-stop seam to the blend, which is fantastic. And exactly what I want in an alcohol marker. I don't use them a lot, so I am not an expert in this at all. I know what I like and what I am trying to do with it. And if it does what I'm trying to do with it, then it's good with me. So, um, yeah. So basically, for what they are, for the fact that they are an alcohol marker, and I don't have a lot of experience with them, they the brush nibs they don't fray. They're not, they don't oh, what is the word I want? Deform. So when you're using them, they don't stick to one side or, anything like that. They always go back to a straight point on your nib, which is great. For the bullet nib, broad nib, the nib works fantastic for small details. The broad nib works great for large areas. However, I find that with a broad nib and even the medium nib on the brush marker, you can end up with streaks if you're not careful on how you're moving that pigment around. And that's the same with any marker. If you're not moving that pigment around properly or quickly enough, you're going to end up with streaks. If you're going to start and stop, you're going to end up with streaks. So, that's just the name of the game when it comes to markers. And what I mean by streaks is, for example, let's grab this one here and we'll use the, so if you go like this and you stop and you let it dry and then you say want to start here, you're going to have that streak. So you're going to have that line. So as you can see, there's lines all the way through it where I've overlapped just a little bit and started and stopped. And you can get rid of those streaks by going over the streak and blending it in and re-wetting that area. However, sometimes if you're not quick enough with it, you can end up with a really bad streaking. And sometimes it's usable. Sometimes it's not. With this cardstock, the alcohol cardstock, it does allow you to blend those together a lot quicker or a lot easier even after you've let it dry. You can have the same problem with your brush marker. You know, if you let that dry and don't go over it and just start on your next area, you're going to end up with a streak down that continuation. So just be careful when you're going through and make sure that you try to work quickly and utilize the paper that is best suited for the, and you don't have to buy the expensive stuff. This stuff is really expensive, but there are cheaper alternatives. I do believe it's Hammer Mill has a cover stock that works really well. I will be purchasing some at some point. I haven't purchased it because it is my birthday month and I'm not supposed to purchase anything. All right, guys, until next time, which will of course be tomorrow, for our Start Over Saturday, where we will be picking a new set of markers and starting a new picture. The Arteza Alcohol Everblend markers, both the bullet nib and the broad, as well as the brush nib and the medium chisel nibs. These markers work very nicely. Like I said, on the Arteza site, you can purchase individual pens, well, individual colors. I won't say individual pens because you will get a pack of 4. Um, but they do have the information on the back here. They're designed in the US. They're an American company. You know, they are an alcohol-based ink. They're non-toxic. You know, it gives you all of that information here on one side. It also gives you the information and the accredited different marks here as well. Yeah, words are hard, and mine are left me hours ago. So they are marked with the codes as well as the names, and they do match up in codes. So when you purchase these, if you have the bullet nib and you just purchased all the brush nibs, you can match up color for color with your Everblend bullet nibs. The older ones I can't be absolutely certain of, but the 144 set of the Everblend ones that have all of this information on it, I know you can definitely match them up. All right, so not a horrible marker, you know, a pretty good marker for the price. The only issues I have found with them is some of them feel a little dry and a little streaky when you first lay them down. And B, there are some of the brush nib markers that have decided that I need more ink than I'm putting down, and that sort of thing. But that happens with other markers as well. You just have to be careful and watch for like a big drop of ink heading down your brush marker and just dab it off on another piece of paper. But other than that, the nibs are great. They don't deform, they don't fray, and that sort of thing. The bullet nib is a very fine nib. It's not like a micro nib, but it is a fine nib, and you can get into small details with it. They do blend very nicely on the blendable cardstock. Um, they blend okay. They blend okay on the Nina 65-pound cardstock, but I do find that they bleed quite a bit on that. And I do find they bleed a lot in coloring books. So just be careful where you're laying down. Watch where your bleed line is, and you should be fine. All right, guys, with that, I want to say thank you very much for watching. I hope this has been helpful. And my final impressions of the Arteza Everblend brush markers as well as the Everblend art markers, bullet and chisel nib, is that they are a good alternative to a Copic. They are not, you know, exactly like a Copic, but they do work very nicely. With that, I would like to say thank you all very much for watching. Of course, remember to like, comment, and subscribe to any YouTube artist that you enjoy watching. And always, always remember to relax, color, and stay safe. Until next time, guys, bye bye for now.